Los Angeles, June 1974. Stage 16 at 20th Century Fox. The biggest movie of the decade is being filmed. $200 million. Every A-lister in Hollywood fighting for a spot. And in the middle of it all, Steve McQueen, the king of cool, sits in his trailer, red-faced, trembling with rage. He's counting lines. Actually counting them? His co-star's lines versus his own. And when he discovers she has more dialogue than him, he does the unthinkable. He demands the studio cut her down, silence her, put her in her place. But Faye Dunaway isn't the kind of woman who stays quiet. What happens next will expose the ugliest truth about Hollywood's biggest star. A truth that reveals ego, insecurity, and a desperate need for control. Here is the story. Picture this, mid-1974, the golden age of disaster films. Airport, The Poseidon Adventure, Earthquake. Audiences couldn't get enough. They wanted spectacle. They wanted stars. They wanted to watch the beautiful and powerful brought to their knees by forces beyond their control. And Hollywood was ready to deliver the biggest one yet, the Towering Inferno. A 138-story skyscraper, opening night gala, fire breaks out, chaos, terror, death. Producer Irwin Allen knew he needed more than just special effects and burning sets. He needed names, big names: Paul Newman, William Holden, Fred Astaire, Faye Dunaway, Jennifer Jones, Robert Vaughn, and of course Steve McQueen. The problem? You don't just put that many stars in one movie without someone demanding to shine brightest. Steve McQueen arrived on that set with something to prove. He was 44 years old, king of cool, the highest paid actor in the world, Bullet, The Great Escape, Papillon. He was untouchable, or so he thought. But Paul Newman was there too. Same age, same status, same price tag. And McQueen knew what that meant: competition, comparison, the constant threat of being upstaged. The studio gave them equal billing, a genius move that solved one problem and created a dozen more. On the poster, Newman's name appeared first on the left side. McQueen's appeared first on the right. Same size, same position, perfectly balanced. But on screen, that was a different battlefield. McQueen played Fire Chief Michael O'Halloran. Newman played Architect Doug Roberts. Two heroes, two perspectives, two men trying to save lives while the world burned around them. The heat on that set was suffocating, not just from the flames and the smoke machines, from the egos, the tension, the unspoken war happening behind every take. McQueen would watch the dailies obsessively, counting his close-ups, timing his scenes against Newman's, making sure the camera loved him more, stayed on him longer. He hired a legal team to monitor his screen time, literally, with stopwatches. This wasn't about art. This was about dominance. And then there was Faye Dunaway. She was 33, already an Academy Award nominee for Bonnie and Clyde. Beautiful, talented, fierce. She played Susan Franklin, Doug Roberts' girlfriend, a role that should have been substantial, emotional, powerful. But in Steve McQueen's mind, she was taking up space that belonged to him. The atmosphere on that soundstage was electric with tension, massive sets, controlled fires, hundreds of extras, stunt coordinators shouting directions, the constant smell of smoke and burning wood, the roar of wind machines, the heat lamps blazing to simulate the inferno. And through it all, McQueen watched, calculated, schemed. He wasn't just making a movie. He was fighting a war he believed he had to win at any cost. It started subtly, small complaints, tiny adjustments that seemed reasonable on the surface. McQueen would arrive late to set, not terribly late, just late enough to throw off the schedule, to remind everyone that they waited for him, not the other way around. He'd question blocking. Why am I standing here? Shouldn't the fire chief be in the center of this frame? He'd suggest changes, little things. Moving Paul Newman slightly to the left, adjusting Faye's position so she wasn't quite as prominent in the shot. Director John Guillermin tried to keep the peace, tried to balance these massive egos without letting the production implode. But McQueen was relentless. He studied the script like a general studying battle plans, every scene, every exchange, every line of dialogue. And he started to notice something that ate at him like acid. Faye Dunaway had significant scenes, emotional moments, long stretches of dialogue where she got to show range, vulnerability, strength. And in McQueen's twisted logic, every second she was on screen was a second he wasn't. Quick question. Have you ever worked with someone so insecure that your success felt like their failure? Let us know in the comments. McQueen began making demands, through his agent, through the producers, never directly. He was too smart for that, too image-conscious. The fire chief needs more presence in Act 2. We need to establish O'Halloran's authority earlier. This scene with Susan is running long. Can we trim it? The producers tried to accommodate him. They didn't have a choice. McQueen had approval over his scenes. He could walk, and if he walked, the movie collapsed. But Faye wasn't oblivious. She saw what was happening. She heard the whispers, watched her scenes getting shortened in rewrites, felt herself being pushed to the margins of a movie she'd signed on to co-star in, and it enraged her. Faye Dunaway didn't get where she was by being quiet, by accepting less. She'd fought her way up in an industry that wanted women beautiful and silent. She'd proven herself as an actress of depth and power. She wasn't about to let Steve McQueen's ego erase her from the screen. The tension between them became obvious to everyone on set. They'd avoid each other between takes, no small talk, no camaraderie, just cold, professional distance. McQueen would sit in his chair, sunglasses on, chewing gum, radiating hostility. Faye would stand apart, script in hand, jaw set, refusing to be intimidated. The crew felt it. The other actors felt it. Even Paul Newman, who stayed diplomatically neutral, could sense the powder keg about to explode. And then came the day McQueen made his move. He went directly to producer Irwin Allen, not with a suggestion, with a demand. Faye's got too many lines. It's unbalanced. Cut them. Just like that. No justification, no creative reasoning, just pure, naked ego. Allen was in an impossible position. Cutting a major actress's dialogue because your male star was insecure? It was insulting. Unprofessional? Everything wrong with Hollywood power dynamics. But McQueen held the cards. The studio had sunk tens of millions into this production. They couldn't afford to lose him. So they did it. They started cutting Faye's lines. Not all at once, strategically. A line here, a reaction shot there. Trimming her character's presence scene by scene. Death by 1,000 cuts. And when Faye found out, she exploded. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning, stage 16. The set dressed as the promenade room. The luxury restaurant at the top of the fictional glass tower where the fire would trap dozens of guests. Faye arrived for blocking rehearsal and was handed revised script pages, pink pages, the dreaded color that meant changes. She flipped through them, her eyes scanning quickly. And then she stopped. Her dialogue, her scenes, butchered. One of her most emotional moments, a scene where Susan confronts Doug about the building's safety flaws, reduced from a page and a half to 4 lines. 4 lines. Another scene where she comforts trapped guests, cut entirely. Her hands started shaking. Not from fear, from rage. She looked up and saw McQueen across the set, talking to the cinematographer, laughing about something, completely unbothered. That's when Faye Dunaway made a choice. She could stay quiet, accept the diminishment, cash her check, and move on. That's what Hollywood expected. That's what they wanted. Or she could fight. She she walked straight across that soundstage, heels clicking on the concrete floor, past crew members who suddenly found other places to be, past producers who wouldn't meet her eyes. She stopped 3 feet from Steve McQueen. "We need to talk." McQueen turned, looked at her over his sunglasses, that famous smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "About what?" "About what you did." The set went silent, completely silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming overhead. Someone dropped a tool somewhere in the distance. That was it. McQueen pulled off his sunglasses, folded them slowly, deliberately. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't?" Her voice was low, controlled, dangerous. "Don't insult my intelligence. You had my scenes cut. You had my dialogue reduced. Because what? Because you're threatened by me?" A few crew members nearby tried to look busy. Director John Gielerman started moving toward them, but Faye held up one hand without looking at him. McQueen's jaw tightened, the mask slipping. This is a fire chief movie. The hero needs to drive the narrative. "The hero?" Faye's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Is that what this is about? Being the hero?" "Steve, there are 8 major stars in this film. 8. And somehow you're the only one who needs everyone else to shrink so you can feel big. Watch yourself." "Or what?" She stepped closer, fearless. "You'll have me cut from the movie entirely? Go ahead, try it. See what happens when the press finds out Steve McQueen is so insecure he can't share the screen with a woman." The color drained from McQueen's face, not from shame, from fury. "I'm the reason this movie will make money. Me. People come to see me, not you." "No." Faye's voice dropped even lower. "People come to see a story, characters, something real, not your ego in a fireman's helmet." Someone gasped, actually gasped. McQueen took a step toward her, not threatening, but close, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate. Faye didn't move an inch. "You think you're the first insecure man I've dealt with in this industry?" Her eyes were blazing now. "You think you're special? You're not. You're just another actor terrified that someone might be watching someone else, might care about someone else, might remember someone else." "That's enough." Gielerman was there now, trying to de-escalate, but Faye wasn't finished. "I signed on to this movie as a co-star, not as set decoration, not as someone to cut whenever your ego needs feeding. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to Irwin Allen and you're going to tell him to restore my scenes. Or I walk, and I don't do it quietly." McQueen stared at her, breathing hard. The entire crew watching, waiting. For a moment, it looked like he might actually hit her. His hands were clenched into fists, his face red, veins visible in his neck. But he didn't, because Faye Dunaway had called his bluff, and everyone knew it. She held his gaze for 5 more seconds, then she turned and walked off the set. Didn't storm off, didn't run, just walked, with her head high, her dignity intact. McQueen stood there, frozen, humiliated, exposed in front of 100 crew members who would never look at him quite the same way again. The king of cool had been dethroned by a woman who refused to bow. The production shut down for 3 days. Emergency meetings, lawyers, agents, studio executives flying in from New York. The budget hemorrhaging money with every hour of delay. Irwin Allen found himself caught between 2 immovable forces. McQueen threatening to walk if Faye wasn't handled. Faye threatening to walk and talk to the press if her role wasn't restored. The studio chose survival. They restored most of Faye's dialogue, not all of it. McQueen's ego had to be protected to some degree, but enough that she felt respected, valued. When filming resumed, McQueen and Faye never spoke again, not one word. They did their scenes, hit their marks, delivered their lines. Professional, cold, separate. But something had shifted on that set. The crew respected Faye in a way they never had before. And McQueen? They saw through him now, saw the insecurity beneath the swagger. Paul Newman, who'd stayed carefully neutral throughout, later said in an interview, "Steve was one of the most talented actors I ever worked with, and one of the most difficult. He needed to be the center of attention, always." It was exhausting. The movie came out in December 1974. It was a massive hit, $216 million worldwide, the highest-grossing film of the year. Critics praised the spectacle, the star power, the suspense. But here's what almost nobody knew until decades later. Faye Dunaway kept every draft of that script, every revision, every cut scene. She documented everything. Years later, in her autobiography, Looking for Gatsby, she revealed the full story, the counting of lines, the petty demands, the systematic erasure of her character to feed McQueen's ego. She wrote, "Steve McQueen was a movie star in the truest sense, but he was also a deeply insecure man who couldn't bear to share the spotlight. Working with him taught me that talent without humility is just noise." The revelation shocked Hollywood, but it didn't surprise anyone who'd worked with McQueen. Because this wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern. On The Getaway, he'd tried to diminish Ali MacGraw's role, even though they were romantically involved at the time. On Papillon, he'd feuded with Dustin Hoffman over screen time. On every movie, the same story. The same insecurity, the same desperate need to be the only star in the sky. What made the Towering Inferno incident different was that Faye fought back. Publicly, loudly. She refused to let him erase her. And in doing so, she exposed a truth about Hollywood that's still relevant today. Ego unchecked becomes tyranny. And tyranny, eventually, gets called out. McQueen never publicly responded to Faye's account. He couldn't. He died in 1980, long before her book was published. But people who knew him weren't surprised. They'd seen it all along. The fragile ego beneath the cool exterior. The little boy who'd grown up poor and abused, now desperate to prove he mattered more than everyone else. It's tragic, really. Here was a man with everything: talent, wealth, fame, adoration, and it still wasn't enough. It could never be enough. Steve McQueen died at 50, mesothelioma, likely from asbestos exposure during his racing days. By then, his best years were behind him. His legacy already cemented as one of the greatest movie stars of all time. But stories like this complicate that legacy. They force us to ask uncomfortable questions. Can we separate the art from the artist? Should we? When we watch Bullitt's famous car chase or McQueen's desperate escape attempts in The Great Escape, do we think about the man who counted lines and cut down his co-stars to feel bigger? Faye Dunaway went on to win an Academy Award for Network 2 years later. She proved she didn't need Steve McQueen or his approval. She was a force in her own right. But she never forgot what happened on that set. She carried it with her, a reminder of what Hollywood asked women to endure, to shrink, to accommodate, to accept less so men could have more. The Towering Inferno stands as a monument to 1970s disaster cinema, but behind the flames and spectacle, it's also a monument to something uglier, to ego, to insecurity, to the power dynamics that turned art into warfare. McQueen's confrontation with Faye wasn't his worst moment, but it was his most revealing, because in that moment, the mask slipped, the cool evaporated. And what remained was a frightened man terrified of being forgotten. Here's the question we should be asking. What drives someone at the peak of their success to tear others down? Is it fear? Is it damage from a painful childhood? Is it the corrupting influence of fame itself? Maybe it's all three. Steve McQueen gave us some of the most iconic performances in cinema history. But he also gave us this cautionary tale, a reminder that how we treat people, especially when we have power over them, matters. It defines us more than any role we play. So the next time you watch The Towering Inferno, think about what was happening between takes. Think about Faye Dunaway standing up to a man the entire industry feared. Think about the courage it takes to refuse to shrink. And remember, talent without integrity is just smoke. It looks impressive, but eventually it clears. And unfortunately, they don't make men like Steve McQueen anymore, for better and for worse.